Greetings. Welcome to our annual joint IAUW-ICHS Legislative Halftime Report session. My name is Maggie Snyder, and I am on the policy team with Lucinda Nord at Indiana Association of United Ways. I also help staff the Indiana Coalition for Human Services. We are joined by David Sklar, who is on the board of the Indiana Coalition for Human Services, and he also serves as vice president. We are still catching up from the multiple amendments in the final hours this week, so please understand that this is a quick overview. If you type your question about a specific bill in the chat box, we will either answer the question during the session or as a follow-up email to you. David will start us off with general information about this short session.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Maggie. The 2016 session of the Indiana General Assembly is what we like to call a short session, where legislators aim to address certain issues which generally don't impact the budget. Budgets are handled during the long sessions in the odd years. And this year, the House and Senate Republicans continue to comprise supermajorities, where Democrats are far outnumbered, 71 to 29 in the House and 40 to 10 in the Senate. And obviously, that has a lot of dynamics on the session. If you review vote counts on a number of individual bills, most of the vote counts include broad bipartisan support, often unanimous approval. However, you will see that there are certain bills where votes are divided either along party lines or where some other characteristics or philosophies may affect the view. For example, there's a lot of dynamics and splits between urban versus rural districts in issues, libertarian or Tea Party influences, religious influences, or how property tax caps have affected local governments.
Governor Mike Pence announced his priorities through his State of the State address, and you can see his 5 priorities here. All 4 caucuses and the governor have indicated that certain education and infrastructure issues would be the most important issues of this session. The House and Senate Democrats also prioritize civil rights legislation, which has likely been on the top of your news sources.
Wanted to quickly cover some hot issues. These are things that are usually covered in your local media, so things you're probably hearing about right now. Right before the legislative session started, your local news, I think just about everybody's local news blew up with coverage about the I-STEP testing issues. Legislators moved quickly to hold teachers and schools harmless with regards to past year's I-STEP testing. You probably also heard a number of things about infrastructure with some bridge collapses around the state and the detour around Lafayette on I-65 last year, calling attention to some of those road and infrastructure problems. There are also a number of bills around tax issues, children's issues, and certain programs that the coalition supports, and we'll get more into those. I'll go ahead and talk about briefly the issue that really has been on the front page of your papers this session, really has taken up a lot of the media attention, as most media sources have covered the fallout from last year's debate around the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or what we commonly call RFRA. This year there was an attempt to discuss the balancing of civil rights with religious freedoms. These debates resulted in hours of discussions. There were numerous protests and rallies taking place at the State House. A compromise bill was drafted, but unfortunately neither side liked it. Advocates for basic civil rights protections for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Hoosiers discussed what they needed to see in the bill regarding whether those individuals could be fired, evicted, or denied business or public accommodations. They were disappointed with what they found in the bill, particularly because it did not include the T of LGBT. It did not cover transgender Hoosiers, and there were a number of ways that it would carve out ways to discriminate against those individuals. So unfortunately that bill was withdrawn earlier this week because Senate leaders did not have enough votes to move it, and so officially the legislation is dead, although we are only halfway through the session, and the discussion itself certainly could be revised before the end of the session. For the last 2 years, the Indiana Coalition for Human Services has grouped our priorities into 5 areas, which you can see here in bold. We want to take an opportunity to certainly celebrate bills that have made progress in these areas. In the Healthy Hoosiers category, we want to celebrate the increased attention to mental health and some substance abuse issues. In the Working Hoosiers area, we're very pleased to see the multiple bills around the individual development accounts, the SNAP program, and parental leave receiving some attention this session. In the Workforce Ready Graduates after school programming is getting attention. And in the Thriving Community areas, we're pleased to see passage of language that clarifies the definition and process for property tax exemption for low-income housing.
On the following slides, we will review the bills that are still alive at this halfway point. We are listing the bill numbers so that you can click directly to the link at the state site. Please note that there were nearly 825 bills introduced, and many were not heard in committee for lack of time. Some were heard in committee but still died in committee. Others were not called down for a vote, effectively allowing the bills to die. We will go through these bills rather quickly, so if you have a question about a specific bill, please type it in the chat box. If we don't answer your question here, we will email you. ICHS is most concerned about healthcare coverage and closing the gap. We celebrate the federal approval of HIP 2.0 in January of 2015. While we support HIP, we want to ensure that while Senate Bill 165 moves forward to codify HIP, that the administration still has the flexibility to make improvements along the way as we learn from the implementation. Senate Bill 165 would codify the principles of the power account, lockout period, and incentives into law. We will continue to monitor this bill. A few of our members have been supportive of the Mental Health Matters bill that addresses provider capacity as well as language to study the navigator capacity, training, advocacy, etc. There are a number of other bills in the health space. As I mentioned, there are a number of bills in response to the heroin and meth issues, and there have been numerous bills related to pseudoephedrine, basically trying to either require pharmacists to consult or screen prospective buyers or to limit purchases by people with drug crimes in their backgrounds. Our advocates for seniors and people with disabilities are happy about the progress to allow ABLE accounts and some protections for seniors, especially in the financial abuse area. Partly as a result of a long investigative piece by the Indianapolis Star on the Adult Protective Services System, there is a renewed attention to increase caseworkers and to include a social work approach in addition to the prosecutorial approach to APS work.
Helping working Hoosiers and those who want to work to support themselves has been a primary focus of ICHS for a long time. And we're happy to report that we've had a number of successes this year and a number of really good discussions with regards to increasing access to critical services such as the individual development accounts, the SNAP program, college aid for part-time students, and accessing fresh food. The fact that we've had so many hearings on these important issues in a short session should absolutely be considered a win. And we want to help these discussions and these pieces of legislation get to the finish line. So we hope that you all will help us by contacting your legislators on these bills that you support. And even though a couple of these bills have died, we're definitely declaring small victories for hearings and committee interest for passage so that legislators are hearing what we have to say and hearing about these issues. Okay, if you've come to this webinar to learn about all the education bills that are out there, unfortunately you've probably come to the wrong place. Neither Indiana Association of United Ways or ICHS have many of these education bills that focus on testing and teacher pay or school performance as our highest priority. There was a quick fix regarding ISTEP to hold teachers and schools harmless because of last year's test results, and there's an ongoing debate about how and when to sunset or replace ISTEP. If you have specific questions, we will absolutely research those for you and find out the status of those legislation and get back to you as soon as we can. There are definitely a number of bills this session related to children with a special and particular focus on human trafficking, child pornography, and sexual abuse and crimes involving the internet. Generally speaking, there's an effort to ensure that children that are the subject of human trafficking are still treated as children and not prostitutes. Parental rights may be terminated for the rapist of a child who's the product of a rape. If you have any specific questions about these bills on these slides, please let us know in the question and answer session. We have a number of issues that we've placed here in Thriving Communities. This is where you usually find bills that relate to community well-being or tax issues. I do want to call your attention to the Bias Crimes Bill, also known as Hate Crimes, which is Senate Bill 220. Indiana is one of only 5 states that does not have this type of legislation, which would maximize penalties if the crime was based on certain characteristics, if they were the basis of the motivation for the crime. For examples, race, religion, national origin, sexual orientation. Since the primary civil rights bill, Senate Bill 344, died earlier this week, we suspect that the bias crimes legislation may receive some increased attention moving towards the end of the session. We also want to call your attention to the road funding bill. Initial analysis shows that the tax increases in the bill are very regressive and will impact lower income Hoosiers. So we want to definitely keep that on our radar and make sure that we're following that issue through the session. IAUW is very interested in all things tax related, but especially the 2 bills that are advancing related to nonprofit property tax exemption. House Bill 1180 would create a special exemption for certain churches and religious organizations, just churches and religious organizations, not other nonprofits that are located in a TIF or tax increment financing district. From IUW, there was testimony against this kind of carve-out and requested further definition and study. The bill was narrowed to a more palatable definition, and we're absolutely celebrating that clearer definition for property tax exemption and for nonprofit housing provided for low-income Hoosiers made it in the bill. And again, want to call attention to those issues of nonprofit housing for low-income Hoosiers. All right, while none of these bills made it through, we want to make sure that they're on your radar. There were a number of bills that we call sort of good government bills. They're still important to keep at the top of our attention and keep focused on. A number of them work to increase our abysmal voter turnout and redistricting process, and other issues that have picked up some attention in the media that we've not been following as a coalition include bills around guns, Sunday alcohol sales, and daily fantasy sports.
Now we want to fly through a few slides about how you can get involved. First, we want to remind you that you, as a nonprofit, can lobby and educate your legislators. Yes, there are rules about lobbying, which is spending your organizational resources to lobby your legislators or to ask your constituents to ask your legislators for a specific bill or policy change. Most of what we do in the nonprofit arena is education and awareness. It is advocacy. We are simply telling our stories of our organizational mission, what certain policies or investments mean for our clients or organizations or communities, and it is absolutely critical to have you as a volunteer or your board members and volunteers tell that story. Because it is an election year, we want to remind you about the cardinal rule for 501c3 nonprofits, that none of your nonprofit resources may support or oppose a candidate or a party. No statements, no campaign contributions. You may educate and lobby candidates, but you may not campaign for them or support them in any way with resources from a 501c3. We remind our friends how to get started in advocacy. If you are nervous or new to advocacy, remember that all of us were new to it at one time. There are lots of resources to help. Here are a few ideas to get started. Here are a few things you can do now. Communicating with your legislators is critical. Most legislators listen to constituents and sincerely care about their experiences. Attend a third house session or meet your legislator meeting. We post an updated calendar every week. Let me show you here. One moment while we pull it up. So this allows you to see when third house sessions are coming up in your community. And we also have a printable link too that gives you all of the information on one page. Many organizations offer a day at the State House or lobby days. Here are a few of our partners. If you are affiliated with one of these organizations, consider making the trip to Indy and joining us. I've recorded a short 6-minute presentation to help you prepare for your State House visit in this event. This is completely new or you need a refresher. There are many ways we work together. Let's face it, the human services community does not have deep pockets to provide the number or scale of lobbyists that the business community has. We have to work together to advocate for our clients and communities. Now we can take a few questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the comment box and we will do our best to answer it now. I'm not seeing anything, so we'll go ahead and conclude the recorded part of this webinar. And here are a few of our websites if you want more information about any of the organizations you've heard about today, or information about government and how to get involved. Thank you for all you do.